Miss Sheila, give you a McMillan.
Yeah, we've got some topics I have a couple of comments about. Yeah, burning the sun wheel. It is something that we do at Yule, as we do at Midsummer. And the idea is that in fact, Thorgrim and Katie, before they joined the AFA, even had their own kindred, and they had one that would actually spin, and it was spin wheel spin, uh, spin world spin, burn wheel burn, and they would do that. I don't know if you've heard that one, but they would spin theirs again to speed on the return of the sun. And so we always have that. Of course, we're outdoors. It's really neat because it's at night outdoors, and we can do a burning sun wheel at Yule. Let's see, songs. We do songs. We actually have songbooks, and some have been adapted from others, but there are a lot of songs that have not been changed. I think We Three Kings, for instance, I loved that as a kid. We don't have any kind of a quote heathen version of it, but there are several that we do. Um, but there are, as you say, Deck the Halls, Boar's Head Carol, talk about a very ancient Old English song. And a lot of them, uh, um, O Tannenbaum, whether it's done in English or in German, definitely that's us. So there are ones that just that any group could do and not feel like they're infringing or taking from or borrowing from Christianity at all. But even so, there's some fun ones that can be done. Um, so yeah, so we do that. We have songbooks, and I think this year Daniel Odom's making up some new songbooks. I'll be interested in seeing what they're like. Be happy to share with you. And then I have a question because I don't think you were on the Go There call the other night, but there was talk about troll wives, and I'm thinking about all the trolls that are in Yule stories these days, and how prominent the elves and the trolls are in Scandinavian literature this time of year for Yule. And for instance, I like the Jan Brett, Who's that knocking on Christmas Eve? Is that right? I think that's the one where the trolls get into the cabin and try to break in, and the little boy and girl are up there trying to keep the trolls out. And they finally get chased out by a polar bear that they think is a cat. Anyway, it's a cute story, but it does have trolls, and the trolls are mischievous, right? And that's what they're supposed to be. Um, Daniel was saying to me, can we come up with things for the kids that are kind of thematic? We can give them lessons through our lore, but also they could do crafts or some other activity and certainly a story. Just wonder how you feel about trolls, because we really haven't addressed that, and they are so prevalent in modern culture with children nowadays.
I
That's for you, Katie.
I know
Have you thought about
I'm
trolls at
I
Yule?
don't know that I have an answer to that right now because I've never really thought about it. I know I've heard about troll wives before, but I've like I said I've never really thought about it. So I can't answer that in this exact moment, but I could definitely come back at you with an answer a little
Yeah,
bit later after I have a chance to think about it. I'm not always the best at coming up with these answers at the top off the top of my head. I need to think.
yeah, I get that. I'm kind of the same way. The idea that the troll wives are there to cause problems in relationships between those who are in love, or to even steal children away. There's a jealousy aspect to the troll wives, and yet we kind of make them cutesy for the kids. And I'm just wondering, is there, a an issue with bringing more trolls into our Yule celebrations if indeed they're seen as being too mischievous. But maybe Ron's got some ideas about this.
I don't know. I do know personally that we treat trolls as being akin to Jotuns. We don't like when we're talking to Owen and Alice, we don't treat trolls as being positive things. We treat them as being negative things. They are
Okay,
generally chaotic. So we tend to try
right.
to focus them more on like gnomes and land wights when we want to talk about things like that. Um, like the zoo has a they call a boo zoo the boo at the zoo every year, and we go to the zoo at night in costumes, and there's always like a troll guarding the one bridge they have over this creek. And we, even when it's not Halloween time, we still call that the troll bridge every time we go over it. And we're like, oh, you better go
Right.
faster. The troll will come get you, because there's so many stories, like the Three Billy Goats Gruff, for example,
Mm-hmm.
where the trolls are bad. So, I mean, I keep it light because my kids are only 4 and 6, but generally trolls are bad guys and who eat people and chew on their bones and suck out the marrow, things like that.
Right. Yes. Yes. Definitely in our lore, that is how they come across. Um, all the cute ones that you can buy and make into toys and all. But anyway, I get where you're coming from. I think that needs to be our approach, and just explain to them, no, they are agents of chaos, and
Oh,
we don't want them around. They
yeah,
do not help us.
when it comes to like the trolls, like the treasure trolls that they used to have when I was a kid, that I think they've started to sort of bring back, or Trolls the movie where they're all singing and happy and stuff. The kids have never really asked me if they're the same, and I've never treated them like they were the same. I always, but it's never come up. But if it were ever to come up, like, well, those are pretend. They're just, somebody came up with the idea to have silly trolls once, but they're really more like gnomes or something like that, like
Right.
kind of deflect, because yeah, trolls are not positive things. They deserve spots in our lore though, because we can learn from them, because we can learn from all the stories that have negative things in them. But yeah,
Right.
Ron, you have your hand up. Did you still want to say something, Ron?
Oh yeah, I should probably unmute myself. But to your point, to Githia McNallen's point, is that trolls, we can't forget changelings. Changelings in our lore, especially Scandinavian lore, were human children that were stolen by trolls, but they replaced that human child with a troll child, the changeling. And those were well, I all the fancy words are escaping me right now. But those were a, a baby that would, instead of suckle on her mother's teeth, they would chew and bite. As they grew, they wouldn't have empathy. They would be cruel to the cat, to the dog of the family. They would kick over the milk. They would be wretched to the farmstead. So, yeah, trolls are definitely not something in general that were seen as a hailful thing. They were more a woeful thing.
Wow, look who just arrived, Spawn. So my question, Spawn, was you mentioned trolls during our Gothar call, and trolls are so prevalent in Yule stories and for various traditions. And I didn't ask you, but what do we do with trolls at Yule this time of year? If you have some ideas, um, how do we explain it to children?
Trolls specifically?
Yeah, because there are lots of trolls in stories, and little trolls that children can make crafts. It's big in crafting, making trolls, and the little, you know the big noses and the beards and all, and the little tiny trolls, and they're made as being very cute, but we know that they're a menace, they're a problem, and you don't want to have trolls around. So just wondering how, if we want to address trolls at Yule, because they are in so many stories, and they are often at least mischievous, if not worse, in stories. But just wondered if you've ever addressed the trolls at Yule time with kids.
Um, yeah, the big thing about that is the stuff that we see. Like, I used to have playing cards when I was a kid, with the little Norwegian trolls with the shock, like, haystack gray hair, and the bumpy warty nose, and a tail. That actually is the Christianization of trolls.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
after the conversion, trolls at first were seen as demonic forces. And I think that is correct in the sense that our ancestors also, the Asatru ancestors, saw the troll as a terrible force, and then it kind of transferred over to the kind of Christian ideas. Trolls were still seen as earthly beings that lived in dark and desolate places, but they could do certain things like they would kidnap people. And one of the things, actually, I have it in a book upstairs. I could when I get a break or a little bit of or something, I can run upstairs and grab it. Um, uh, this troll woman captured a man and screamed in his ear and turned him into a troll. And this is all like just after the conversion period. There was a woman who was kidnapped by a male troll and was forced to have children, and she started to turn, and then a priest went up there and placed a cross on her forehead, and it burned into her forehead and broke her from her spell, and he drove away the troll. So like pre-Christianity, trolls were not to be trifled with. They're terrifying beings. Post-Christianity, they were still terrifying, but the church used them as a caveat to kind of, explain its existence. Kind of like how possession movies are now. If people are demon possessed, and the priest always comes in and saves the day. And then eventually, as secularism became the primary driving sense of the Nords, the trolls became commercialized as cartoony, tiny, happy day little creatures that were, could be mischievous or what have you. I think the biggest thing is that creature that they're referring to is more like, and in reality, trolls are kind of this way as well. They're technically land wights, or they're landvatir, or they are Alvar, and that's where I made the jump, because the title Alvar, I know it confuses people nowadays, but it's just a title, just like a Jotun is a title. Um, the So like the little creatures that are mischievous or whatever, they're more akin to land wights, but Alvar is kind of a broad term. The only thing, it gets even more broad if you don't attach a predicate to it. So perfect example of this is the name for a dwarf. I've forgotten which story, but he's referred to as Gandalf. This is where Tolkien got the name for the wizard in his book. Alf basically means something that is perfect with whatever's before it. So a Gandalf is a person or a being who is synthesized with magic, because a Gondor is a wand or magic. Leos Alf is a being that's completely synthesized with light. A Svart Alf is one that is completely synthesized with the stone, the smoke, or the energies and pressures of the earth. A Dak Alvar is a being that is synthesized with the dark, and I think that darkness is poetically death or mortality, traveling hell's road, if you will. So the Yule elf is a being that is completely synthesized with Yule. So it's kind of that dividing line. I would say if you're talking about trolls for Yule, but you're not talking about the Yule elf, then, calling them land spirits, calling them land wights, because the all the telltale signs are there. They live in stone. If they get touched by daylight, so very much like the Svart Alvar in the story, with like Alvis. So they have all the traits of being land wights, but the troll of our ancestors' time, like pre-Christianity, was much more like a demon. And was, just terrifying. And we get that a lot from Christianity's like usage of the troll in their conversions. So I mean, to just answer your question, I would say, referring to the trolls as like, quirky land spirits of the stone and the trees, and even saying to the kids, they're not like, the other trolls that are really bad and very dangerous. Because I do think that distinction is important. Trolls that are the real trolls are attracted to places with death and sorrow, and inhabit lonely and desolate places, and they are extremely mean to living beings, and they kind of are confused with poltergeist, and a lot of times, like a Svartalvar, which is connected to the physical, can come into a house and cause all kinds of problems, throw things around, do all kinds of mean and mischievous things. But a troll is malicious and mean and evil. And they go to battlefields, they go to deserted cemeteries, and just places of true sorrow. I think the best case that I can think of in the modern times in which a troll has inhabited a place is the Black Mausoleum in Greykirken graveyard in Edinburgh, Scotland. That's a really interesting story about that place. And if you're interested in kind of like what trolls are really like, I would say, go check that out, and you'll get kind of more of the real trolls. But yeah, so that's kind of my answer to that, is like, they're land spirits that are, yeah, connected to things, and they're not so malicious and what have you.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. Always a font of information. There's never a time where I don't learn something listening to you talk, Swan.
Thanks.
I don't know how you have all that information in your head. Mine would explode with half of it. Ron, I see you for hand up.
Yeah, I hope I don't hijack the conversation, but Whit and Swan, it's terrific hearing your voice again. But Gandalf, you mentioned, is also a kenning for the Allfather, Odin. How, 2 points. How come you don't think that's not you, but how come Ingfrey doesn't have that kenning as the Lord of Elfheim, right? And also during Yule, we always think of the Allfather with the Wild Hunt, but also we see a lot of oaths on the boar during Yule. So I don't know. I guess I'm hijacking the conversation. I don't mean to, but how do you wrap all those together? Going from troll, all of a sudden jumping to Gandalf being Odin, but Ingfrey could hold that title, I imagine, and oaths on the Yule boar and the wild hunt and all those. How do you wrap those things together?
Well, okay, to address one thing,
Sorry,
I
sorry to,
do not
sorry to
believe
interrupt.
Gandalf is a Heiti of Odin, or at least it was not used in uh, any lore that was written by Sæmundur and Snorri. It was a name of one of the Dvergar or Svartalf, the dwarves, in the Voluspa. I do not believe that it was ever used as a name connected to Lord Odin. And also, there might have been a king that bared the name. But yeah, I don't. To my knowledge, it's never allocated to Lord Odin. As far as Yule goes, one of the big things about um, Lord Frey gaining dominion over Leosalfheim at the cutting of his tooth is, I mean, I find that interesting, the culturing of the cutting of the tooth. And it's never emphasized whether or not it's the first teeth, which a lot of people assume it is, but it might have also been the first tooth lost, and then when the new tooth comes in, that was held with, significance by our ancestors, but we don't really know. But I mean, he is called, I believe he is called Lord of the Elves. I would have to find that. In one of his kennings. But the Leosalf, are more connected to the natural phenomena of growth and springtime, that kind of seen as the intermediary place between heaven and the world of men, the light beings that are stewards over, vegetative growth and the fedunctity of herds, and the kind of fertility of the herds and the cattle and sheep and chickens and so on. So they do play a large amount, and oftentimes I think they get labeled as land Vatir, just because, I mean, these are just titles that kind of are not super nailed down. The boar. So the boar comes from the Anglo-Saxons. The lowland Germans, that we know that they lived in the land south of the Danes or the Danai, or what the Tacitus called them. But it's strange because the Danai are really old, and there is no mention of the Anglos and the Saxons by Tacitus. So they may have formed out of older tribes and eventually became known as the Anglo-Saxons. And when they moved over into the Isles, they brought much of their traditions with them. And the boar was a huge part of their culture, and so there seems to be a massive cult following to Lord Odin and a massive cult following to the Lord and the Lady. And then, like, Thunor was, just by the evidence that we have, is more or less, I'm not saying that this is absolutely true, but by evidence, we have more poetic storytellings about the Yule Father, Lord Odin, and at least boar worship or boar veneration, than we do of, like, Thor's hammers in the Anglo-Saxon time frame. But they brought that with them, and one of the big things about that was, during Yule, Oh, he does mention the Angli. Yes, he does. You are correct. I think it was the Saxon or the Saxons that I think he doesn't mention. And that they may have been from the Ingvaeons, which again connects to Lord Ing. And so they brought a huge amount of boar iconography, and I think again the Wild Hunt. And the Wild Hunt is such a strange thing because I wonder how much the Wild Hunt was also affected from um, local Britannian lore. And this might have been an admixture between the Britannians and the Germanic Anglo-Saxons when they came over there. I'm quite positive that the Anglo-Saxons probably had a winter tiding boar hunt because it's such a perfect time to do it. The forests thin out and the boars are rooting around for truffles and acorns. It's just the perfect time to do it. And I feel like some of the balance between Lord Odin and I'm not going to say Cernunnos because we don't really know, but the native the native Britannian god of the hunt. There seems to be this kind of synthesization there, and it survives in England with Herne the hunter, who is a mortal man and but has like supernatural powers and is kind of like a combination of Lord Odin and whoever perhaps the Britannic Lord of the Hunt is. So that time of year, having the boar hunt and the wild hunt itself is all super congruent. And I think, like, for instance, in the traditions that that I'm coming from, winter finding is the start of the winter time, and from winter finding to the night of Lord Odin on Yule, he is out riding on the wild hunt and taking to the air and then at the final day of Yule, the 12th night, here at my house when we celebrate Yule, we always eat a pig's head on the 31st, and we kind of make like oaths, accomplishments that we're going to attain on the head, and that comes from that boar hunt. And again, I can't like quote where it absolutely comes from, but I could find it is where they would make oaths on the head of the boar. And I mean, that stuff survived long after Christianization, and it was really revived back in the Victorian age during like the Christmas Carol times, Ebenezer Scrooge and all that stuff. That time frame, there was a resurgence of nativism in England, and you can find a lot of Victorian pictures of them dragging the Yule log into the houses or into the great, ballrooms. You can find pictures of them carrying the boar's head at the for the feast. Now they condensed it all to the Christian Christmas, but you can see the telltale signs of where it came from before. Also, an interesting part of that too was the Yule elf. They called him Father Christmas, but he's riding a goat, which is reminiscent of the Yulebach and the Tomta or Yule elf, or the little troll gnome spirit that rides the goat in the Scandinavian countries. So there is a clear, like, that moment there, I think, is the convergence point where we start to see that the goat and the spirit that rides on top of it bearing gifts, that starts to get much more broad and connective when we look at like the fact that Father Christmas, you know, the English were doing it as well.
Swan,
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. Can I interrupt you?
No, yeah.
Very rudely. Nick has had his hand for raised for a while, and then I still have like half of my presentation left.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and ask Nick to go ahead with whatever he's got.
Yeah, obvious. Thank you. So I'll note. I was doing some looking up on some sources. Um, the Helga Kvitha Hjorvatsoner, the prose bit after verse 31 says, "In the evening was the oath swearing. The sacrificial boar was led forth. Men laid their hands on it and swore oaths at the Braggerful." Also, we mentioned
There it
the
is. Yeah,
source.
that's the source. Sorry.
Yeah. You also mentioned the source for Freyr as the Lord of the Elves. I can't find that specifically, but it's all depending on translation. What I've found is this Paul Beekman Taylor argued, no, Alaric Hall argued the Arfvalda from Beowulf, line 1313, as ruler of elves.
Ruler
As
of
a,
yeah. As a height.
yeah, that's just what I had. I was looking up sources for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
All right, that was a wild sort of tangent we just went down.
Yeah.
From talking about Yule to trolls to, I mean, like I said before, Swan, any information you give is good information, and you touched on a couple of things that I had mentioned during the first part of my presentation and clarified them wonderfully. So I appreciate that a lot.